Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Rejuvenation Fest, which I so look forward to because I get to meet and speak to such amazing people. We have today joining us Vidusha Nathatarna, who I'm very pleased and honored to have as my global G100 Oneness and Wisdom Global Advisory Council member, the guy behind the scenes who asks me all these amazing questions as to what I'm doing and how I'm doing. And today you are going to get to meet him and actually speak with him as I ask him all these amazing questions. And the first one is about what it is we have on the screen. What will it take for us to succeed? So, welcome, 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 Vidusha. So lovely to have you. I know we have had some
Thank you very,
amazing
very much for having
conversations.
me. It's an
Yeah,
absolute
we've
joy
had some
always.
Yeah, we've had some amazing conversations in the past. You seem to be frozen for some reason.
Am
I
I
think it was
still?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So in any case, we can still hear you, and you've got that lovely smile. So let's
Shall I
let's
shall I
crack on.
exit and come back in 2 seconds?
No issue, no issue. And what we have with technology always surprises us. But then again, we can still have amazing conversations, and we are always so grateful and thankful for technology to actually help us to learn from one another, to explore different topics and suggestions, and actually take things to different levels where we thought we could not before. So, thank you, technology. Total gratitude for Zoom and StreamYard, who make all of this possible for us and make life easy and accessible to everyone. So, thank you very much for everyone who is joining in. Now will be a good time to come and join us as we have Vidusha,
I'm
who's
back.
now talking about hi Vidusha. Thanks for
Thank
coming
you for
back.
having me. Apologies for the technology.
No, but
I do
that's
get
okay.
frozen every so often.
I was just sharing with everyone how great technology is that we are
Oh yes,
able, you sitting
yes,
in Sri Lanka, me in the United Arab Emirates, and having this
absolutely,
amazing conversation like we did in the past. I think it was a
of
couple of
course.
years back when we ventured into doing some amazing work together. And I could not help but bring you back on because you've got amazing amount of information. And I love the way that you share the information, which is so
Thank you.
awesome for people to grasp and to get. So, I mean, it's an honor to have you with us
It's an
today.
honor to be here. Absolute honor
Okay,
to be
so
here. Thank you.
thank you so much. So, Vidusha, the amazing question that I'd like to ask, start off with and kick off this
Yes.
conversation is success. We all have heard of it, we all want it, but sometimes we really get stuck with how to approach it. And I think our conversation today is going to be around that. But to start off with, I have to ask you, do we need to do something to become successful, or do we need to become someone to actually become successful? It's a very
Mm,
tricky kind of thing because many people dabble with that,
mm.
but many people then have to follow certain rules and regulations and then they get there. But many of us really have this thing of truly being successful within ourselves, and then success hits us. Um, ask you that as a starting question.
Thank you. So, can I step back a little bit and point in two different directions? I think there
Okay.
is success that others see in you, and there
Okay.
is success that you see in yourself, right? Let's start there.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
one of the biggest problems, especially with social media and everything else, is that
Mhm.
there's a constant demand to compare yourself with others, right? I think we were spared that growing up. Your circle of friends were relatively small. And if you, like me, had your formative years in a relatively cocoon kind of environment, You
mm,
probably have 100 people at most, if you're lucky, to compare
mm,
yourself with.
that's right. Right.
Compared to today, where you will probably have 1 million people that comes on your feed, and you will have a Bill Gates on one side, and you will have a
Mm,
social
mm,
media influencer from another side, and
mm,
all of these
mm,
people seem amazingly
mm,
influential and successful and doing
mm,
phenomenally well, and you're comparing yourself against them.
mm.
So can I answer your question slightly differently, in that I think it's really important for you to figure out what success means to you first.
Exactly.
First, whether the world sees you as successful or not, I think, is a secondary thing.
Mm,
I'm not saying it's not important, okay? I'm not trying to compare and contrast the two. I'm merely saying that I think it's worthwhile you figuring out what success means to you first, pursuing
mm,
that.
mm,
And of course, if you want to be seen as successful in the
mm,
traditional sense of the word, in how society sees you and deems
mm,
you, then you need to pursue that too. But
mm,
here's why I'm saying that, right?
mm,
It would be an awesome shame
mm,
if everyone else saw you as successful,
mm.
and you were not happy with yourself. Right? And you
Been there,
felt
done
miserable
that.
with yourself.
Been there,
And
done
that's,
that. Yes.
of course, and it does happen, right? At the same time,
Mm,
I'm not saying for a moment that if you felt that you were really successful and nobody else saw you as successful, that's not
mm,
something, bad. I'm sure it is, but it's, I think you can live with that.
mm, mm.
I think you can. I think the first and foremost, okay, back step. I'm permitted to share stories, right? As I always do.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So one of the things that my dad used to always drum into me, and 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 I still remember me doing a set of slides on success many moons ago when I first started out. We ran a set of programs internally within our own organization when I used to work for an organization, and the organization was called Courtals, and they were owned by a company called Seda League,
Mm,
and I still remember running an internal program called Success, right?
mm,
And when I did my first deck of slides on success, I defined success. Okay.
mm,
And I still remember I used to bounce off a lot of things with my dad, and my dad listening to this, and he raised his eyebrows and turned around and said, I don't agree with your definition of success. And I said, well, this is like the dictionary definition of success. I mean, what else is there? And he smiled and turned around and said, well, I had three ambitions in life, and I met all three, and I think I'm successful. And he's a person who did the same job in the same organization for 37 long years, never got promoted, never asked for a promotion.
mm,
But he's also one of those blissfully happy people I know. He's probably the happiest person I know. Okay. He's 82. So I turned around and said, okay, I mean,
mashallah.
my dad wasn't the benchmark for success for me. Okay. So
Mm,
I turned around and
mm,
said, look, you did the same job for 37 years. I honestly don't think you can be qualified as successful. And he said, well, that's your definition of success, but my definition of success, I wanted three things. The first, I wanted to be able to speak in English. The second, I wanted to have a car. And the third is I wanted a son. And when you were born, that was done. Right. So I said, is that it? And he said, yeah, that's it
mm,
for me. Right.
mm, mm, mm,
And
mm,
and and I swear I went back home that day and I sat down and I asked myself, does that really equate to success? And I couldn't find a reason to not agree with him from his
mm,
perspective.
mm,
Now,
mm.
is that enough for me? Not by a long shot.
Short.
Not
Yeah.
by a long shot. Okay. So I still remember going for my first session and presenting my definition of success and telling the story about my dad. And I turned around and said, I think the first port of call is for each one of you to sit down and ask the question, what does success look like for you? And I still remember 30 people in that audience writing 30 very different things, and it blew my mind.
Exactly.
And I still remember one of the things that actually stuck with me to this date. I
mm,
can't remember all the other 29. There were lots of
mm,
definitions of success as they felt,
mm.
but one wrote, "I am successful now. That's enough." and and I burst out laughing as I'm doing now. And I actually asked him, I didn't mean this in jest. I did mean this very seriously. Right? So I said, "Can you please have another go at it?" And he said, "No, I really think I'm successful now. I'm the only one in my family who did a bachelor's degree.
Mm,
I'm pursuing my master's and I know I'll finish that. I'm doing a decent job. I got
mm,
married to the love of my life. I
mm.
have two kids. I don't want anything more. I'm successful as it is. Anything that comes on top of this is a big bonus. I'm fine.
Bonus.
I'm
Exactly.
I'm I'm fine as I am. Who and so that's one aspect to it. Now the question is, do you want to be seen as successful by others as well? Now, if you get into that conversation, that's a lot murkier. That's a lot murkier. And for your own sanity's sake, I often advise people whenever this conversation of success comes up, you better write that down too. Right? When you look
Ready.
into somebody else's perspective and say you want to be seen as successful in their eyes, qualify it
Mm,
by three things. Okay.
mm.
Firstly, who do you want to be seen as successful
As-
by? Is it like a world population? Is it your family? Is it your colleagues? Who,
mm,
right? I mean, there is a
mm,
Bill
mm,
Gates successful, Steve Jobs kind of successful. There's Jennifer Randeep and Vidushanath Vitarana type successful. And there's my dad type successful. Now, he's successful in
mhm,
my eyes in that sense, right? As a dad, I think he
mhm,
was a fantastic dad. As a
mm,
human being, I think he's a great human being. So I have a lot of regard and love for him, but I don't know whether
mm.
the rest of the world shares that. In fact, most of the world wouldn't even know his name, right? So define
Exactly.
who you want to be seen as successful by, number one.
Mm,
Number
mm,
two, define how you want to be seen. Do you want to
mm,
be seen as a nice guy? Do you want to be seen as
mm,
accomplished? Do you want to be seen as rich? Do you want to be seen as someone who others want to aspire to be? What
mm,
does that look like? What does
mm,
so who do you want to be seen successful by? How do you want to be seen successful by? The
mm,
third question has nothing to do with success. It's an internal introspection. How much of
mm,
your own life and your being are you willing to forego in order to achieve that?
mm, mm,
Because here's what I have learned, right? I have honestly learned that there is always a gap between who you are and who you need to be in order to be seen to be successful.
mm.
And the wider the audience, the wider sometimes you need to sacrifice. And you must be willing to do that. If you're not, I think you're wise to turn around and say, thus far, no further. If I have to sacrifice one, two, three, four, five, I don't care how the rest of the world sees me, I ain't doing it.
Mm.
So, as long as you ask those three questions, I think the second aspect of how do you want to be seen successful by others also gets answered. I hope I answered your
Right.
question.
No, no, it's good. And it should have started with I wanted to actually pose that question to you the last. What does success mean to you? So let me ask you, what does success
Okay.
mean to you right now,
Okay.
Vidusha?
Right. I must admit how I see success when I started out in life as a maybe 16, 17, 18-year old. And what I see
Mm.
success as now, I think has fundamentally shifted.
J-
Okay.
Absolutely. So
But
would it be pertinent to say that change is constant, but changing is a personal choice?
oh, it is. It very much is. I think most of us change without even us realizing. I mean, I've lost my hair. That's change.
I've become gray haired, so that's
had,
where we
had
go.
absolutely no control over this, right? But whether I embrace my baldness or not is up to me, right? I can either cry
Exactly.
about it all day, or I can turn around and say, hey, you know what? I've lost my hair, so be
You
it.
look like the Sri Lankan Yul Brynner. So
Yes, very
there
much
we go.
so. Yes. Thank you for being kind. I've been called much worse. So, but no, seriously, I think I don't think certain fundamentals change. I think for me at least, okay, I think two or three things are fundamental. I think
Mm,
in any form of degree, in today's context, to be very practical about this,
mm,
I think you need to have a certain amount of financial freedom. I don't mean
mm,
being rich. I think you need to have
mm,
a certain amount of financial freedom, because if you don't have financial stability as a
mm,
bedrock that supports
mhm,
you, many of the choices you would like to make is not possible for you. I think people need to be aware of that. Sri Lanka went through a massive financial crisis. We went through
mm,
300%, 400% of inflation. That's not
mm,
easy to manage and cushion unless you have certain financial stability for yourself.
mm,
So I think
mm,
when you're young, I think it's prudent to not live
mm,
for the day, but to make
mm,
sure that
Any of
you
the choices you are
ensure that you're able to ensure that you have a certain amount of financial
I
stability to
think
begin with.
people need to be aware of that. Sri Lanka went through a massive
absolutely.
financial crisis.
Just a
Is that
moment.
We went through
yeah?
300,
Yeah,
300%, 400% of
I,
inflation. That's
I think
not
there's a bit of
easy
an echo,
to
right?
yeah.
manage and
There's a thing.
cushion
Just a
unless
second.
you have
Yeah, sure.
certain
Yeah, carry on.
Okay,
Sorry.
so I think that's a good place to start, especially when you're young.
Mm,
I think you need to
mm,
be wise about money. I think you
mm,
need to have plans to make sure that within the first 10 years, and when you're starting out, so between 20 and 30, I think one of the first things you need to do before you do anything
mm,
else, if you don't come from wealth to begin with,
mm,
I think you need to have a
mm.
certain amount of financial stability. That's one.
Yeah.
The second, I think, is down to relationships. I think
Mm,
who you become in the future has a lot to do with relationships. Now,
right.
you don't have a choice about who you're
Mm,
born into, that you don't have a
yeah,
choice with. But who
definitely.
enters your life as a young adult, you're completely in
Mm,
control of. So, your
absolutely.
spouse or your partner,
Mm,
your innermost circle of friends,
mm,
your first couple of bosses, and once you become an assistant manager or a manager or a team leader, your first
mm,
set of team members who report into you are fundamentally important. Build
yes.
strong enough relationships and networks that will help you grow, help
Mm,
you learn, and help you
mm,
succeed in whatever sphere you choose to be in. So that's two.
correct.
So financial stability and healthy relationships. And the
Mm,
third, I think, is how you grow yourself as an individual. And character plays a huge role in this. And I mean
yes.
getting certain skills that will help you in life in general, not necessarily only in your career. So for example,
Yeah.
being ability the ability to communicate well, I think,
Mm,
is a fundamental skill. The ability to
yes.
get along with people is a
Mm,
fundamental skill. I do draw the distinction. You don't have to like everyone that you work with, but you must have the ability to work with them nonetheless.
mm,
Working with
mm,
people you like, anyone can do. Working with
mm.
people you completely dislike, in fact, you might hate personally, but still be able to have a professional relationship with, I think, is a very important skill to have, especially if you're pursuing a career which involves people. Unless you're sitting somewhere by yourself and doing everything by yourself, then it's a different conversation. But most of the
Mm,
work that we do require us to interact with others. The ability to have resilience to come back from failure, I think it's an
mm,
important skill too. The ability to make decisions and understand that when you're making a decision, you really don't know whether it will work out or not.
mm,
You really don't. I mean, I often tell people there's nothing called a right decision or a wrong decision. You only have decisions. You have good outcomes and bad outcomes. But even a bad decision executed right sometimes can actually give you good results, right? Then what
mm,
does it
mm,
become? It was still a bad decision, but it brought you good
mm, mm,
results. So,
mm,
decision making, I think, is a core skill, and also the
mm,
ability to learn something on an ongoing basis, I think, is a fundamental requirement too. You need to have a
mm,
certain amount of curiosity and a certain amount of
mm,
humility for you to know that you don't know everything. So if you get
Correct.
these basic things right, I think
Mm,
you will be successful in whatever you choose to be. So when I was
mm,
young, I think I had three ambitions, right?
mm,
I
mm,
really wanted to have financial independence. I
mm,
really wanted to helm a business in the sense of climbing the corporate ladder, becoming a manager, becoming successful in my career. And the third,
mm,
I think I always wanted to make sure that I have a decent enough relationship. I'm an only child,
mm,
so I always wanted to make sure that I was taking care of my parents. And
mm,
if I do get married, and once I get married, I really wanted to be happy in it. Those were the only three ambitions I had. Kids were not part of the equation at that point.
mm,
All that changed when I did have Shakya, my daughter, and then Jai a few years later on. And I think something fundamentally shifted. And I honestly didn't worry too much about where I went with my success.
mm,
I really think there was a lot more focus on making sure that my daughter and my son did better than me. Let's put it that way.
mm, mm, mm,
So
mm,
there was a shift. There was a shift in
mm,
focus. So what success looks like for me right now is, if I am able to see in the next 10 years or the next 15 years, if I live that long, my son and daughter really happy, completely comfortable in their own skin, doing
mm,
something that they love to do and excelling in it, I think I would
mm.
consider that success for me. And if I
Wonderful.
can actually look back and
Mm,
say I had a part to play in it, I think I'll be
mm,
happy.
true. I think if everyone was to look at that in a way of recognizing the fact that everyone has their own way of success,
Oh, for
and
sure.
instead of trying to compare, I think one of the major issues that we have in today's uh, way of thinking, the way of approaching success, work, relationships, or anything, is to always seek validation.
Hmm.
Um, and not that it's not important, but it is not the only thing that will help you to really become successful per se, be it in any situation, whether family, whether work, whether business, or anything else. And as you very rightfully said, that it's more about recognizing who you are and what abilities, talents, and skills that you bring to the table. You see, unless, and this has been my personal experience as well, and also dealing with multiple people while providing jobs for them, it was more about what they thought they could do, and not only think, but were they really, was that the innate capacity and ability? So, for example, if I was to share an example, usually what happens is, like, when we are going going for a job, or being part of a community, or we tend to look at what it is that we can do first. Okay. And then we get stuck, because when we are trying to do something, and we are not then at the end feeling enthused enough to do it, there seems to be a disconnect there, because we have like a job description saying, okay, fine, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do, and you say, yes, of course I can do it, but then you're not really into it. So I want your views on that, Vidusha, because unless someone is innately not aligned with what brings them joy, it becomes difficult. It becomes like a strain, a pain, to try and gain validation on something that you are really not cut out to do, for example. What are your
Okay,
views on that?
sure. So let me unpack that a little bit, right? Because there are set of layers on this.
Mm,
The first is validation from whom,
mm.
right?
From
I don't
everyone
think
around. Look at me, see me. This is what I do. This is how I am.
yeah.
Which is the
So
usual trend nowadays. Like, I
absolutely.
am this,
So
I'm that. It's not like, yeah.
uh,
It's like,
yeah.
tell the
So
world,
so
are you?
because
The question, yeah. No. What I'm saying is, that is what, look at me, see me, I am this, I
Yeah,
am that.
yeah,
For me, it is like, oh my God, what is going on? And secondly, are you really that, or is it a facade?
sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So, absolutely. So, which is why I kind of always pause on this whole question of validation, right? There's nothing wrong with seeking validation. I think we all seek validation. But I think at least once you become an adult, and when you're 18, 19, 20, okay,
It's okay.
I,
Yeah, you want.
it- until you're 20, well, fine. I mean, kids seek validation all the time, and that's fine. But the moment you become an adult and when you start going out into the world, there are, I think,
Mm,
several things that you need to know about yourself. I think it's important for you to know what you can and cannot do. That's one.
do exactly.
The second is what you like to do and what you dislike to do. Sometimes we think they're one and the same. They're not. What I might like to do might not be something I'm good at. And what I dislike to do might be something I'm very gifted at. I'll give you an example. Right? So my mom put me onto violin lessons when I was really small, 7 or 8 years old, or seven, I think, or even younger. And I was naturally gifted to play the violin. I still remember doing Trinity College London exams, um,
Mm,
and they were tough exams. I took grade
mm,
five without doing grade one, two, three, four,
mm,
and I aced it. And
mm,
I still remember my tutor, and she was a very strict disciplinarian, and she was a stickler for absolute perfection.
yes, mm,
And she put me on to grade six, and I aced that too. And I
mm.
hated every minute of it. I absolutely hated it.
Mm,
And then I started playing basketball, and I loved it. And I was
mm,
hopeless at it. Right? I was absolutely hopeless at it. Now, I pursued basketball for 4 long years, 3 to 4
yes,
years, and I was
tirelessly.
tirelessly. And and eventually, one of my coaches had to tell me, "Look, you ain't good enough, Nath. Just quit whilst you're ahead." And he was right. And I took offense in somebody saying that I was no good at something, but he was right. I was no good at it. Now, by that time, I
Mm.
had given up. I never picked up the violin since. I
Oh,
picked up the
okay.
violin last when I was probably 10 years old or 11 years old. I've never picked it up because I absolutely hated playing the violin. But the
Mm,
point I want to make is I was good at it,
mm, mm,
but I disliked it.
mm,
Unfortunately, in our jobs that we choose, also, there are things that we might be really good at, but we don't like doing. And there might be
mm,
things
mm,
that we really like doing that we are no good at it. Now, when you're a kid, you can play for the fun of
mm,
it.
mm,
I don't think when you're an adult, okay, let me qualify this statement, right?
mm,
If your parents have a ton of money
mm,
and you have from 20 to 30 to dabble in something and figure these things out,
mm, mm,
by all means, do things that you're not really good at and get good at it over a period of time because your parents will bankroll you. So it's not a problem,
mm,
right? But if you're like me, who comes from middle class parents, and you have to go to do a job when you're 18 years old in order for you to, feed yourself, I think you need
mm,
to be very strategic in how you make those decisions. So
mm,
figure
mm,
out what you're good at and figure out what you like and dislike to do. And if the two don't match, make a
mm.
conscious decision whether you're okay being mediocre at something that you like doing, or whether you are willing to switch your mindset into saying, I will do whatever it takes to make me successful.
Okay. I've got to share this. There's a comment from Eva. She says, I wanted to be a medical doctor, but I was terrible in biology, chemistry, unfortunately. And then I discovered psychology, and today I feel that I'm a doctor for the organization. Brilliantly put.
Absolutely. Yep,
Thanks, Eva.
absolutely. Absolutely, right. So, so figure that out early on in your life, and
Mm,
then you can decide to love what you do or do what you love.
mm. My next question to you will be, how do we actually because I have worked with many, and I'm quite sure you must have come across many people as well, that they're so passionate about what they want to do, and they might really suck at it. how do you explain to somebody who really would like to be doing something and really are not all there with doing it brilliantly?
Okay. So
There's another
two
one.
things
Before
there.
you answer that, there's another one. Passion, grit. It's amazing when you achieve to continue it. Thank you. You will be amazing. I think you'll be amazing. Okay, so that's good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eva.
So
Yes,
so
carry
just
on.
just to tag along to Eva, passion and grit alone isn't enough.
Oh, there we go. Okay,
It really isn't. Okay.
okay, okay.
Passion and grit, along with a certain amount of skill, is essential. Take skill
Yes.
out of it, you're playing a very dangerous game. So, answering your
Mm,
question, how do people realize this? Here's the
mm,
answer. The answer is going back to what I asked initially. What does success mean to you? If success means you doing something that you're truly passionate about,
mm,
even if you're average at it, which means the
mm,
market rates that you are able to demand for that will be equally average, and you're fine with it.
mm,
Go
mm,
for it. Because
mm,
here's something about passion and grit. Over a period of time,
mm,
if you do something with a ton of passion and a lot of grit and a lot of commitment, you
mm,
will get better at it.
mm, mm,
However, so compared to what you were year one,
mm,
compare it to what you are in year 10.
mm,
If you consistently put in so much of time and effort into it and passion into it, you will certainly see yourself improve,
mm,
right?
mm, mm,
However, is that enough? Let me take it into something like a corporate setting. You're working for an organization,
mm,
right?
mm,
Um, you you're working for an organization, you're working for a boss, you are being evaluated by somebody else apart from yourself.
mm,
And the bar is here, okay?
mm, mm, mm,
And you're there. Now, every year you move an inch closer towards your target,
mm.
understand the expectation also rises, right? The
Exactly.
expectation
Yeah,
is not
that's
going to
it. Yeah,
stay exactly the same. So
exactly.
you have to ask this question: am I able to fulfill that expectation that is being leveled at me by somebody else? And if the
Mm,
answer is no, you have two choices. Either
mm,
you can move to an organization where the expectation is slightly lower and you're kind of delivering a little there or beyond that. You
mm,
don't
mm,
have to
mm.
be inside the same organizations are different, and expectations of
Mm.
organizations are widely
It's
different,
not different.
even within the
Yes.
same industry. So,
Yeah.
so you can make that career switch, or you must be okay with somebody pointing out the absolute obvious, which is in our standard, you suck. It's a bit like going to campus, right?
Which is
No,
true.
I mean,
Absolutely. I
put it in
can't
my.
agree.
I
I
can give
think
you a
you are
quick
spot on.
example on this, right? I started doing my PhD, okay, and one of my biggest drawbacks is methodology. Okay,
Mm,
I am not a stickler for method. I'm a pragmatist. I am a practitioner. I'm not an academic. So when I
mm, mm,
undertook my PhD studies, the supervisor that was assigned to me, she told me,
mm,
Vidusha, you know what? To do at a PhD level, your methods your method section must improve. You really must read a lot more, and reading alone isn't enough. You have to really start applying what you learn and write it. The first time I wrote an essay for her, she literally cut out 90% of it and left something like 10 sentences out of 5,000 words that I've written.
oh my God.
Now, yeah, and and she was right in doing so, right? That's the expectation. Now I have two choices in this. Either I
Mm,
can read a heck of a lot than what I'm reading now and match
mm,
up to that, or turn around and say a PhD isn't for me,
mm, mm,
right? Now I started reading and I realized that it still wasn't enough. Okay.
mm, mm,
And I remember having this conversation with Anton to turn around and say, dude, I really need to have some more time, because and I literally gave up most of the work I had to do,
to accommodate the
buried
reader.
myself in books.
Jesus.
and I've been doing reading since. Now, even now, I'm like 50% or 60% there. I still have 40% to go, but I'm making that conscious effort. And realistically, when somebody who's much gifted than me and better skilled than me will probably finish their PhD in 3 years, I'll probably take 4.
I have a question though.
Yes,
This is your life, Vidusha, we're talking about.
sure.
Okay. And you're putting in so much of effort and trying to achieve the so-called PhD. Okay. How much of your time, your energy is going into something that does not really bring you joy? Right now, it must be a pain.
Well,
I mean, I'm just asking.
no,
So
no, no. It's a valid
again,
question. It's a question I've asked myself.
it's a pain, and most of the time, I would ask that question also. It's like, do we need to put ourselves and our lives into jeopardy just to be able to have something that is way up there? Or are we, or can we rather, be really great at what it is we have right now, be grateful for it, and enhance that as opposed to wanting to achieve it? And this is a question that I'm asking everyone. It's not only Vidusha. It's
No,
something to
no,
actually think about and
absolutely.
actually consider because you have a life also.
Sure,
Okay.
sure,
And
absolutely.
it's a question of how do you want to live your life? Because I'll give you my example. It's like I had an organization, I had a business, I had a company, I had an office, I had all of that. And then I had situations where I had to take a step back. Why? Because of personal reasons. But
Sure.
then to try and manage being that, being this, being that, being that, and that, I was like falling to pieces. And then I made a conscious choice, which is again something that we all need to do is is this worth doing? Is your life worth stretching the way we're stretching it to try and achieve something, maybe not for us to become more of who we think we need to be based on who, based on who is the
Agreed.
question. So
Absolutely.
it's
So
it's yeah.
let me answer that truthfully and
Mm,
completely honestly, but also in a couple of layers, right? So
mm,
number
mm.
one, I chose to do this. Correct?
Okay. Mm,
Nobody forced me to do it. I chose to do it. Why did I choose to do it? For two reasons, right? Two very, very personal reasons. The first is I think my dad always wanted to see me have a PhD. He was an
yeah.
academic, he was in the university sector.
Mm,
To him, someone who has a PhD, means something to him, right? He's
okay.
82.
Okay.
I postponed doing
Yeah.
the PhD for the longest time. And
Mm,
I realized he doesn't have too long.
mm,
And I really did want to do it for him. That's one. But the
mm,
second reason I wanted to do the PhD was because for once, I saw a way
mm,
of bridging the academic and practitioner divide. I found an organization that was
mm,
doing something spectacularly different in Sri Lanka, which was
mm,
unheard of anywhere else in the world. And I didn't see any literature around it in the common
mm,
parlance of academia. And I really wanted to see whether there was a way of combining what we are taught in books and what actually
mm,
happens in reality and bring it together.
mm, mm,
And me, that's the outcome of that is joyous. Now the process to that is painful.
mm.
And I'll give you an example on a parallel plane, right? I always wanted to climb Kilimanjaro. I
Okay.
postponed that for the longest time. Now,
Mm, mm,
I
mm,
eventually did that year before last, and I went with
mm.
my son. Okay,
Wow, which is awesome. Yeah.
which is awesome, but the climb wasn't awesome at all. It was painful. It was as painful as it gets. It was 7 days of sheer agony. And the last 3 days, my son vomited
Oh,
on the journey. I'm
oh,
responsible for him as the father.
mm,
He couldn't sleep at night. he did probably the toughest climb of that journey, which was called Barranco Wall,
Mm.
having had only 2 pieces of toast
Oh,
and walking for 10 hours in something like -6 degrees.
wow.
The last night climb, which was at night, you probably leave at about 11 o'clock at night. It was
Mm.
11 o'clock when we summited. It was nearly 12 hours of walking,
Mm.
-15 degrees. Was that
Mm.
fun? Hell no.
No.
But that's what you undertook to do. So
Mm.
you shut up and you do what needs to
And
be
you
done,
do it.
right?
Exactly.
And now, of course, that was 7 days. A PhD is 4 years, right? Or 3 years at least. But
Mm.
but my point is this, right? A, if you choose to do it, do it. You have your reasons that you started doing it. If you think it warrants it, and if you think that there's merit in doing it for yourself, and you see that there is an outcome at the end that you want to cherish, go for it. However, if you chose it because of vanity, then stop.
Then stop. Exactly.
Then
Exactly.
stop. Because it really isn't worth putting your sanity through it. And you only can answer that question for you. And deep down inside yourself, you know whether you're doing this because you want to show the rest of the world that you have a PhD, or because you wanted to climb Kilimanjaro or whatever. Or are you doing that purely for your innermost satisfaction? And for me, both of these, when it comes to Kili, it was one of those things I wanted to do from the time I was 16 years old. I finally got to do it. I find a humongous amount of joy in it. The PhD, once I finish, I know for a fact three things will happen, right? Number one, I know for a fact that I would have been forced to come to grips with one of my weakest links in my academic life, which was methods. I'm now forced to make sure that I specialize in it. And I love that. I ever so often force myself to do things that I'm not good at. Okay. And make sure that I at least get mediocre at it. The second is I would have done investigations into organizations that I would have never done otherwise. I'm doing research into 6 different organizations that are doing best practices, 4 from Sri Lanka, 2 from outside of Sri Lanka. And I would never go into the in depth study of an organization the way I'm doing now in my entire life, because I see the inner workings of an organization. That has
Exactly.
direct benefit for me in my consulting practice. And the
Good.
third is on a very, very personal note. I often tell my children to put themselves through willing pain. And I don't think my children have seen me do that for myself.
For myself.
And I think this is
Now
one
this,
of the
yes.
most practical ways I know how to show them, you know what? Here's an example of it. And I think at some point in their adult lives, if they want to look back at an anchor to say, you know what? This is what it means to put yourself through a lot of pain willingly. I would like for them to have a small personal example from me on that.
Beautifully put. I love it. So now I come to the part where I'm going to pick your brains to share you, ask you to share your wisdom, being this
Sure.
amazing consultant that you are. So, what does it really take for us to look at success in a different way and to truly succeed? What are some of the tips that you can share with us, Vidusha?
Okay. So the first thing is stop comparing and stop competing. Okay.
Thank you
Stop
very much.
comparing,
I
stop
think
competing.
that is something that we really everyone needs to hear this.
Right.
You are totally
Um,
unique. Please
yeah,
work on your
absolutely.
uniqueness. Get
So
to know
both of
who
them,
you
no?
are.
No,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Exactly.
Not comparing, not competing either. Don't compete. Apart from competing with yourself, number one.
Mm, mm,
Number two, paradoxically, don't
mm.
ever tell yourself that you're good enough as you are also. Don't do that
Exactly.
either. Right? Because sometimes we kid ourselves into thinking, you know what, I'm
Mm,
fine as I am. I'm good as I am. I'm beautiful as I
yes.
am.
Mm,
Yes, yes, of course. But there's always room for improvement.
mm.
Always
Okay, so no competing and no comparing. What else?
comparing. but also tell yourself that there's always room for improvement. Always tell
Okay.
yourself that. No matter how good you are, you might be the world's best at something, but you can
Mm.
improve on that also a little bit. So try and make
Yes.
sure that whatever you're doing today, you make a conscious effort to do it a little better tomorrow in whatever capacity you're in.
Mm.
It doesn't really matter what you do. Just just tell yourself, tomorrow I will do something slightly different. I will do something slightly better. Okay? That's two.
Always room, sir. Always room for improvement.
Improve,
Is that it?
right?
I'm
The
just putting it
third,
down.
yeah,
Mm.
the third, I think it's really important for you to understand that at some point,
Mm.
success veers into two different directions.
Mm.
There is your success, and
Mm.
there are others' success.
Mm. Okay.
Try and find joy in both. If you're successful at the cost of others,
Mm.
I'm not going to pass judgment on anyone for being that. Okay, that's fine. I mean, hey, if if you're playing Wimbledon or if you're the finals of the NBA, of course, beat your opponent for sure. but, but most of life isn't that, isn't it?
Mm.
And I still remember something from my school days, and I remember this very, very vividly. And I'm not going to mention names because I was with a bunch of my college friends just a while before I
Mm.
logged on with you.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And we were talking about reunions and getting together and so on and so forth. And I still
Mm. Mm.
remember this very vividly. And I don't think I've spoken about this ever.
Mm.
And you bring out one or two of these, right? I share certain things on discussions with you that I never discuss anywhere else. But one of the times, I still remember this, and I don't think anyone in school knows this. But there were very few times I have come first in class,
Mm.
right? And one of it was down to the fact that one of my friends, very, very dear friend of mine, long, and I haven't met him in probably 25 years. And if he's listening in at some point, some weird reason, if he's listening in, I know you will know who I'm speaking about. There was a lot of competition to come first in class, right?
Mm.
And there was this one time I really wanted to come first in class. I really, really did. And it mattered to me because I knew it mattered a lot to my mom and so on and so forth. And I still remember this
Mm.
this guy coming and telling me, "You really want to come first in class, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, I really do." And I came third or fourth in the
Mm.
term before. And we have three
Mm.
terms, right? We have the first term, second
Mhm.
term, and the third
Mhm.
term is the final one. And
Mm.
that's the tougher one. But in between also, we rank
Mm.
everyone.
Mm.
And he used to always stump me on maths and science. Okay, he used to always stump me on maths and science. For everything else, I can compete with him and get slightly ahead. But on maths and science, I'm like 10 marks, 20 marks below him,
Off.
and that's it. That's gone. And I still remember him telling me, if you really want to come first in class, dude, you have to get better at maths and science. And I said, I suck at maths and science. And I still remember him sitting down and taking me through how he makes sums.
Wow.
Okay. And I got 1 mark more for mathematics than him. And I got
Wow.
1 mark less than him for science. And I still remember this really vividly. Okay. And for once I beat him, and that's the only time I beat him. Right.
But this is interesting, Vidusha, if you don't mind me interrupting.
Of
What an
course.
amazing guy. What an amazing guy
I know.
to
I know. This
actually
is what I'm
help
saying, right?
you, to make you
To
sit
beat him,
down.
literally.
To
Right.
how, I mean, now that for me is the guy had confidence in his own ability to be
Of
able
course.
to tutor you for you to become what he knew you would love to have been. Oh my
No,
God.
absolutely. And
I
no,
wish
and
more
and and
people
I and
were
I
like that.
remember going
Wow.
and I remember going and
Wow.
asking him, Mazan, don't you feel bad? And he smiled and said, Mazan, don't worry about it. I'll beat you next time.
There we go. But what an amazing, amazing relationship there.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and but get this, right up until O levels, and this happened in grade 7 or 8. Right up until O levels, he taught me maths and science. I never took private lessons or tutoring for any of
Awesome.
my subjects.
Amazing.
Right.
Absolutely Awesome.
I still ended up with a C and he got a D, right? He got a distinction, I got a credit. But what I'm saying is,
Well,
for that
even that
one moment in
experience,
time, for that one
amazing.
moment in time, I came first in class, and my mom could walk into the classroom and feel so proud about the fact that her boy came first in class, right? And I
Amazing.
honestly, I'm telling you that there is great joy in seeing someone else succeed.
Oh my
And
God.
if you can humble yourself into saying it's not a competition, if I can help someone else succeed, so be it.
Absolutely. I can't
So
agree with you more.
so as much as you drive your
Oh,
own success, try and make sure that
mm,
you help someone else succeed as well, right?
absolutely. Spot on. Eva
And the
says
final
top,
and the
top of the
final
line.
little tip and the final
Mm.
little tip I will leave with is try and have a little bit of fun doing it too. Life
Oh
is a little
God,
too
yeah.
short.
I keep telling everyone that, can we please have some fun? Ah,
Yes. Even at the cost of looking like an idiot sometimes, it's all right. but, but have a little bit of
and
fun, because honest to God, when you come to my age, you realize that if you haven't had a little bit of fun along the way, you really have very
what's the
little to look
point?
back on. Yeah.
What's the point? Literally,
What's
what's the point?
Yeah. So
I
have a
think,
bit of a
yeah,
laugh
as
and
as,
have a bit of
as we
fun as well.
mature, as we actually mature, we get to see and get to realize that everything does not have to be an uphill task. Okay,
No.
and if you
Even if it
can
is, you can have
actually
a laugh
get,
over it.
I laugh at myself all the time. In fact, in the last meeting, I remember crying because I had become so vulnerable and wanting to ask for help. And I took everyone by surprise because they could not believe that I'm supposed to be this. Again, the perception usually goes with, you have to be this, you have to be this, you have to be that. No, I'm sorry. I was just being my vulnerable self. And it really opened up the doors for people to recognize that. So that is an amazing conversation. We still have, I want to keep you on for another 8 minutes if I can. I know it's very
Of course.
late for you in Sri
No,
Lanka,
no, 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 no.
but
It isn't. It isn't. By all means. By all means. By all means.
if anyone has any questions that you would like to ask Vidusha, he is a champion for sure. I have learned a lot from him. He has actually helped me to see business, the corporate world, and personal life in a totally different light. So Eva has said, I love Eva because she is also from the corporate world and has opened up her own consultancy now. She's also our amazing Angola country chair, and she's an HR professional. Eva, you're actually speaking over there to Vidusha, who is an HR junkie, if I may call him, and he's the destiny architect for an amazing organization called Luminary Learning. And I'm so, so happy to have him here. So she says we need more people like that, especially leaders that really leverage their teams with no fear. Success appears in different ways. We could not agree with you more. And
Yeah.
Eva, I stand corrected. Eva says that she is a professional at leadership now. So I'm going
Very
to pull
nice.
that up. Let's see. Leadership with humanity, Jennifer. Hell yes, that's the way. Right. Do we have a question, someone for, oh, she would like to have some more tips. Can you share some more tips as to
On
how we
on
can
success
become
itself, is it?
more unsuccessful? Exactly. Just give us a battery and take your time. I'm enjoying this conversation, quite honestly. So
Thank you.
please.
No, no. I think one of the dimensions of success that is often not discussed and often kind of disregarded is how much others play a part in it, and
Mhm,
whether you can either reject it or whether you can embrace it. I think most of us, when we are successful, we think we did it. We have this
mhm,
conversation around performance management all the time when we consult for
mhm,
organizations on performance and we set
mhm,
targets. Whenever we
mhm,
succeed, we turn around and say, you know what, it was our strategy, we had great teamwork, we had good leadership, etc., etc. But then when things go south, we turn around and say, market conditions were really bad, we had COVID and everything else. I always tell people you can't have it both ways. You can't really have it both ways. Now, if you say that market conditions were good and therefore you were successful, what was your contribution towards that? And if you turn around and say market conditions were bad and we kind of didn't hit our targets, then um, if both are market conditions, I'm fine.
Mm,
But if you
mm,
turn around and say you were successful because of strategy,
mm,
then you have to turn around and say, you know what, our strategy sucked during COVID, or our strategy sucked at a certain time. That's
mm,
why we failed. And if
mm,
strategy sucks, I'm supposed to take the can as the leader, right? I carry the can.
mm, mm, mm,
Okay.
mm,
Success is the same. Decide for yourself whether you are making your success or other people are making it for you.
mm,
And I have often argued, you look behind any successful person, as much as your own attributes, there are sets of contexts and situations that made you become successful in order to
mm,
capitalize on what you have. And if you
mm.
really dig deep, you will find that there were one or two or many people who prompt you up in order to be successful.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm saying this cautiously because I know I'm on social media and I don't have the luxury of trying to do this over an entire day, right? But I often tell people, if you're successful, I think it's because of others, um,
Mm,
not because of
mm,
yourself, right?
mm,
At least 50-50. So,
mm,
yes, you need to have skills, but think about this, right? Think about this very carefully. Lots of people have the same skill sets. Why is it that only a few succeed and
mm,
become really great at what they do? Take a look at books.
mm,
There are people who write phenomenally well, but only
mm,
one or
mm,
two people really make it out there. What makes the
mm,
difference? The
mm,
difference is sometimes your publisher. The difference
mm,
is a social media influencer who loved your book, who went and raved and ranted about you,
mm, mm, mm,
right? Sometimes, most of the time, as much as you bring your skills to the party, you need others to extract that out and help you shine.
mm, mm,
And if you're wise, I think you will find those people for you
mm.
consciously. So,
Yes,
one of the dimensions of success that I often tell people to be mindful of and consciously start building is a group of people around you who are confident enough in themselves who will help you succeed.
absolutely. Absolutely, because I think that is the most important and a very vital point to take. And it is about unless you are not fulfilled in who you are and really know who you are, you really can't contribute to anyone else because it just, there will always be some sort of a lack or conflict or limitation, and there'll always be some rejection or confusion and trying to find fault, because it is necessary for us to really consider that what you've just said. It's really really cool. You have Raida, who is our Oman country chair, Vidusha, and she says that the conversation is absolutely nice. She's coming
Thank
a
you.
little late, but I think that everyone is going to listen to this. Eva has another comment. He says we need to believe in ourselves and we need people that believe in us today. Totally agree.
Absolutely.
100% Eva. Really true. And it is important, as I always say, I have a question. If we inherit people, for example, if you're in an organization or community or whatever, if you inherit people and they are probably not from the way that you think, do you believe that it is something that we need to consider as to how to bring them to what it is that you believe in? And if they don't choose to come on board, what suggestions do you have so that the people who are trying to bring them on board do not feel that they are failures?
Thank you for that. Yeah. So, couple of things, right? The first is, I think if you are in a leadership position, you owe it to your team to make sure that you do everything conceivably possible to bring people on board. That's on you.
Mm,
Okay.
true.
Having said that, there is a part that the team needs to play as well. If you're not coming on board because you lack skill, you need to have that conversation and to turn around and find places where they will shine. That's important from a leadership perspective, right? Because sometimes I often tell people that there is nothing called a bad person, but there is something called a bad fit,
True,
right?
very true.
So if your skill sets don't actually fit the requirement, we need to find ways in order to solve that.
Yeah.
But if you're not coming into the party because you don't like me as
Mm,
a leader, right, and you have a problem with me as a leader, I honestly think you owe it to yourself as well as the people that you work with to have that conversation, to turn around and say, you know what, something tells me that you don't like me. Is this true? Can you tell me why? Because that way,
mm,
at least I can know whether I can shift and change or not. And if I can't, and I've done this pretty heartbreaking job in my career a few times, you do need to have that conversation to turn around and say, you know what, let me find you a space where you can shine, because you
true.
clearly can't do that working with me if you don't like me at a fundamental level, right? And
Mm,
sometimes you
mm.
don't need a reason to dislike a person, right? Sometimes you just dislike people, and that's fine. I think it's perfectly fine. I mean, what can you do, right? I mean, you have this reaction to somebody instinctively. But professionally, I've always felt
Having conversations, but Vidusha, I think what you mentioned is having conversations or trying to reach out to people to
is
identify
critical.
what it is. What it's absolutely vital to do that. And if
Absolutely.
they
and
don't
and
choose, and if they don't choose to actually respond or come back, then it's up to them what it is that they would like to do. I
but
think.
here's the underlying principle. The underlying principle is, if you're in a leadership position,
Mm,
you owe it to your team to
exactly.
ensure that if it isn't with you that they shine, you find
Who
them a
else will
person they
exactly?
can
That
shine
is
with.
good. Absolutely.
You are
Absolutely.
not permitted to gut them and make them seem like failures simply because they can't work with you.
Exactly. Because that
That's
is
not
going on
permitted.
a personal level. Absolutely. Spot on.
That's not permitted. So it should never be personal. And if you can't do that much, I honestly think you shouldn't take on leadership positions.
Absolutely.
It's a,
100%.
it's a bit like I draw the same comparison with children. Okay, I often tell people that sometimes your kids might not like you. That can happen. That can happen oftentimes, right? But it's your job to make sure that you reach out. It's on you to do so,
Dude,
right?
absolutely.
Similarly,
Absolutely.
at the same time, you can't ever tell your children you are bad and stop at that. You need to tell them three things. If you tell them that they're bad, you need to tell them how to become good. Number
Mm,
one, you must give them every conceivable opportunity and resource to become good.
mm.
And the third thing is the most important thing. You have to ask them what you need to be in order for them to be good.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Do the same
Absolutely.
thing with your employee population as well.
But this is the
What do you
thing.
need to
If
become good? What
exactly.
resources do you need to have it? Let me support you with
And
it.
how do I need to
And how
change
do
them?
you want
Exactly.
me to lead
Need to
you
be.
in order for you to shine? That much is
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I just love it. And it's so strange because the same thing could apply to any situation. If you
absolutely.
want to be the leader of your life, leader of a community, leader in a business, leader in any area, leader as a family member. Amazing
Absolutely.
advice. Thank you so much, Vidusha,
Thank you
for
very, very
taking the
much.
time. It has been a real honor to have you. And every time I speak to you, I get some more words of wisdom. So all I can
Thank
say,
you.
it was a
And
wow conversation, as
thank you.
always.
And
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 we will,
likewise, Jenny,
no,
as much
seriously,
as anything else,
we will
I learn
get.
a lot from you too. Thank you.
But I think we make a really good team, don't you think?
Absolutely. Always.
Anyway, thank you very much for taking the time, Vidusha. Ladies and
Thank you, Prince.
gentlemen, we were having a conversation with the amazing Vidusha Nantvatarna, who is a destiny architect with Luminary Learning, and who I personally have the privilege of having on my global advisory council as my G100 Oneness and Wisdom wing. And I am so privileged to have you on board. Thank you so much, Vidusha. God bless and
Thank you.
have an awesome evening ahead.
Thank you very much.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone. See you
Take care.
soon. Good
Bye
night.
bye. Bye bye.